Stop me if you've heard this one before. There's a little girl, and her name is Little Red Riding Hood because she's little, and she always wears a Red Riding Hood. One day, her mom says, please will you take this basket of goods to Grandma who lives in the forest. Don't dawdle. So Red Riding Hood, being an obedient little girl, takes the basket of goods to her grandmother in the forest, doesn't dawdle. The end. Good story, eh? Good story. Good story? Yeah, I'm getting some shakes of the head there. What's missing?
The wolf.
The big bad wolf, what I call the BBW factor. Because we've all heard that we have to tell stories in speaking. And in fact, stories are the one thing that connect us to the meaning of what we're trying to do in our lives. And if you're a leader, one of the things that you have to do is connect your colleagues, the people who are following you, the people around you, to the meaning that they have in their lives. That's what our job is as a leader. So it sounds crazy, but if you think about it, the yellow card's up, it's very distracting. That's fine. It's just a bit distracting. Silly me the wrong story there. Thanks. If you think about leadership, what is leadership? Leadership is the ability to achieve your goals, to clarify and set goals, and then achieve them through yourself and others. So what is leadership? It's the ability to clarify and set goals, and then achieve those goals through yourself and others. Some people, Oren for example, want to ride around the bay in a day. Off you go. Just go the right way around, will you? Other people want to run a healthy club. Other people want to do whatever it is that they want to do. But it's through yourself and others. So you didn't do it on your own. You had to borrow a tube from someone, I'm guessing. You didn't walk the rest of the way. So you can't do it on your... Very often you can't do it on your own. A girlfriend of mine used to say, Erich, you alone can do it, but you can't do it alone. So what is the mechanism that we leaders use to connect people to the meaning that they have for themselves? And the mechanism we use is a story. And we heard from the beginning of this speech that Little Red Riding Hood without the big bad wolf is not much of a story. Not all stories are created equal. So, they're not. How do we then craft a story that will mobilize people? Barack Obama's just won the election in the US. And I was listening to, on the media, it's a podcast out of WNYC in New York City. And they talk about what difference can a president actually make? And it turns out not much. And they've done studies of elections, different elections and different presidents, and it turns out that the stock market doesn't move when the president either gets elected or doesn't get elected. The president doesn't make much of a difference. But an inspirational president can make a difference. And the one we always think of course, is JFK, who set this vision. There's a memorial to him in the gardens here. Who set this vision of putting a man on the moon in those days, a man on the moon, and returning him safely to the earth by the end of the decade. So we all heard about SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-based. By the end of the decade, it was specific. Was it achievable? Well, nobody thought it was. Was it realistic? Nobody thought it was. But in the event, he managed to do it through the story that he was telling about the American people. There was a narrative there. And in journalism, we talk about the narrative. So, how do we apply this to our stories? The first thing we have to have is a story, and a story is where characters meet plot. So all inspirational stories are exactly the same story. It is how I struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled until I finally reached my goal. And then there's the kicker, and we've had two wonderful examples today. We've had Oren saying how I struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled until I ran all the way around the bay on my bicycle and survived. And then we had our CC1 speaker, Steve, who told us several stories. But he didn't just tell us the story, did he? He said, I was scared of buses, and I thought I have to go to uni, so he wanted to go somewhere. And he thought, I need to do something differently, and he sat and he planned. And what did he learn? He learned that by planning and resolution, you can push through and achieve something that's scary. He was standing on the platform, and he stepped off the platform, and what did he learn? Anybody? Trust the process. Thank you. Absolutely, Dory, right? Trust the process. So what are we learning here? We're learning that a story that Steve told us, if at the end of the story there's a point of reflection, that is the point that we remember. Somebody said, the minimum unit of human understanding is a story. Isn't that a nice way of putting it? The minimum, so what does that mean? If we want to teach people things, we have to tell them stories. We have to package them up in this minimum meaning, units of meaning, a story. But it's more than just a story. Stories are very important, Doris Lessing says. Stories are so important that we tell them to ourselves when we sleep. Nice way of talking about dreams. People don't know why we dream. Some people say it's exactly as Stephen was and Oren were illustrating, to debrief the day, to think back. You know, this is what we did in our round robin this afternoon. To think back on a memorable time. What have we learned? What was memorable about that? And I'm sure that as we remembered those things, they became more memorable. We've extracted the meaning out of those things. So what have I said so far? I've said that not all stories are created equal. I've said that you need stories if you're going to convey any kind of message, if you're going to teach anything. And thirdly, that stories connect us to meaning. I've said that in order to make a story meaningful, it has to have some elements. It has to have a character and a plot. And what is a plot? A plot is a goal, where you're going to, and obstacles. So what is the story? The story is some characters who have a goal and who encounter obstacles along the way. And then finally what I've said is that if you're going to make this effective, the story has to have a point at the end. And if you do all of those things, you then have a memorable story. And used correctly, this memorable story can help you lead by connecting people to the meaning in their lives. So far so good? Good recap? Good. So I'm standing there as the district governor for 74. It's an elected position. You have to be voted in. And so with all elections, what you want to do is you want to get voted in. So what do? You try and persuade people to vote for you. And what we did is we have campaign literature and we write campaign posters and so on. And so I sent this out to my president. At the time, her name was Adele Durant. And I said, what do you think of my campaign material? She said, this is very nice, Erich, very nice. How does it help me get a CC? It doesn't. I don't understand the question. So I got to thinking about that, and I thought she's actually asking two questions. Number one, she herself may want a CC for herself. She might want to get her own competent communicator qualification. But she's the president of a club. And so she might want to get a CC for the club. And so what this told me was that Adele sees, and she should, Adele sees the CC qualification, getting somebody all the way through the program, as the minimum unit of success of a Toastmasters club. And then I thought to myself, if that is the minimum unit of success of a Toastmasters club, to produce CCs, I wondered what the CC10 was. And you can read it in the manual. It says, inspire your audience by appealing to their higher motives. And then it hit me, we, as Toastmasters, are in the inspiration business. If our job is to produce qualified CCs, people with CC10s, if our job is to produce inspirational speakers, by definition, we are then in the inspirational business on a continent, Africa, that really needs inspiration, in a world that really needs inspiration. So if you're doing a CC, that's what you're doing. You are contributing to the store of inspiration in the world. If you are running a club, make sure you are running it according to the Distinguished Club Program, which says 4 competent communicators a year need to be produced by the club, and 2 advanced communicators. And then I did some arithmetic, and you can multiply 123, as there are in this district, by 6, and you get to nearly 800. That's 800 inspirational speakers a year that not only is Australia richer for, not only is the world richer for, but Melbourne, Adelaide, South Australia, Tasmania, these are the places that are richer for our being there. Now, I hope you can see, this is not my tummy rumbling, by the way. This is Oren's office. Oren, what are you doing? Can you see, I told a little story about my campaign literature and about how bad it was, really, and about how I wanted to be elected, and how my club president said, I'm not going to elect you on that ticket, how is it going to help me get a CC? And can you see that at the end of the story, there's a leadership message there that takes a goal to have a district full of clubs that are running the Distinguished Club program and turns it into personal, I'm hoping anyway, personal meaning for you. If you're in the club, all of a sudden I'm hoping you're thinking, wow, I really need to get that CC so that I can go out and inspire people. I really need to get there. And if you're a club officer, I'm hoping you're thinking, wow, if we run a distinguished club, then that's what we can do to contribute to the health of the world. Did I do that? Did I manage that? So what have you learned about leadership and storytelling, or leadership and public speaking? The club asked me to speak leadership and how to improve oneself in public speaking. What have you learned today? What was useful?
I think what was useful is the fact that Toastmasters should be inspirational.
Toastmasters should be inspirational. Toastmasters is inspirational. We need to remind ourselves of that. Thank you. Yes, absolutely right. Good. What else?
Use stories.
Use stories, Prashant, but not just stories. What kind of stories?
Inspirational stories.
Good. Stories that have obstacles and a point of learning at the end. Very good.
It's really important to incorporate the conflict in a story, because without that, it's not really a story.
Without the big bad wolf, Little Red Riding Hood is not much of a story. It's really important. And the more conflict there is, the more satisfying the end is of the story. One more point.
I think also has to connect internally as well, where you can actually see the implications for yourself and transfer the inspiration.
Correct, because if you can, lovely, well put, if your audience can see it for themselves, then you have successfully transferred the inspiration. And that is one of the things that we learned in District 74. We ended up number 80 in the world. We had been number 88 in the world, and we ended up number 8 in the world. And one of the ways we did that is, I think you've put it perfectly, Steve, we managed to transfer that inspiration using these stories, using this leadership language. And what I learned from my time as the district governor was, if you can transfer that inspiration well, if you can do that skillfully, then you've got them on their way. And once you get them on their way, then you as the leader have to get out of their way. Because once they're on the way, get out the way, because they will run you over on the way to their goals. Mr. Toastmaster.